Welcome everyone to the March 7th, 2023 council meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is live streamed and recorded, so it will be available on the town's website at www.parrysound.ca and also on YouTube as well. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people under the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the waterways traveled by the Métis of this region. May I have a mover and seconder for the agenda, please? Councillor McCann, Councillor Borneman. And I am going to ask that item 911 be moved up after the public meeting so that it's fresh with everyone, and we'll discuss it all at one time. And are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Nope. Okay. And all in favor of the agenda as amended? And that's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? No? Okay. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Councillor McCann, Councillor Ashford. The minutes of the regular council meeting held February 21st, 2023, and special budget meeting held February 28th, 2023, be approved as circulated. Any discussion or comments on those meetings? No? All in favor then? And that's carried. Pursuant to this meeting, there was a brief closed session that was moved by Councillor McDonald and seconded by Councillor Borneman. And it was pursuant to section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended. Council of the Corporation, the Town of Parry Sound moved to a special meeting closed to the public in order to address a matter pertaining to B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, committee of adjustment applicant. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hold a public meeting under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended. The purpose of the meeting is to hear a presentation to obtain input from the public and stakeholders on the municipality's proposed development charges, bylaws, and underlying studies. May I have a mover and seconder for the adjournment of the regular meeting? Councillor McCann, Councillor Keith, seconder. That we do now adjourn the regular meeting and declare the public meeting open. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Ms. Johnson, can you explain how the public was notified of the meeting regarding the proposed development charges, bylaws, and underlying background study?
Yes, Your Worship. The underlying background study was posted on the town's website on December 28th, 2022. Notice of the public meeting was posted on the town's website as of February 3rd, 2023, and was posted in the local newspaper in print and online the week of February 6th to 10th, 2023. Required notice of the public meeting and provision of the background study is therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with Schedule 1, Sections 10 and 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended.
Thank you. We'll begin with a presentation regarding the background study and proposed development charges bylaws. And Mr. Harris, would you like to make some opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the Mayor indicated, we're here this evening to get input from the public on the results of the development charges background study. Before we get into those details, I wanted to provide a little bit of a context as to why we're looking at development charges and why it's being recommended that we introduce development charges in the town of Parry Sound. I think we can all agree that we need more homes and more employment opportunities. So I think that's a common ground that we start with. The purpose of the background study was, okay, we need to look at what is the infrastructure that's required to support additional growth. That could be anything along the water system, the wastewater system, transportation, and otherwise. So that background study, will go through that tonight and have the results of that study. Once the growth related projects were determined, the question then became, how are we going to fund it? We have a couple of choices. One is the province has given the municipalities the ability to impose development charges as a a source of revenue to pay for growth-related infrastructure. The other alternative is to use property taxes and water and sewer rates to pay for the infrastructure. The three main considerations as staff that we looked at in determining it was appropriate to bring forward a recommendation to introduce development charges was the town's property tax rate currently relative to our neighboring municipalities is significantly higher already. So further increasing that tax burden on all the residents in town wasn't deemed to be desirable. We have the ability to incur debt. We're limited as a municipality by provincial legislation. So we can only borrow so much money, and we needed another source of revenue to generate the funds to put the infrastructure for growth in place. So we looked at the ability to borrow. We're constrained as to how much we can borrow, and we do need that borrowing capacity to make sure that the infrastructure that's currently in place in the town can be maintained and in a safe and reliable manner. The third thing was that the town hasn't had DCs in, I'm going to guess, 20 plus years. And yet the growth in our area has lagged behind many other municipalities that have had development charges. So it raises the question, how much, if at all, does development charges impact or stall growth? Because we've been lagging behind for years. Other communities with DCs, as I mentioned, have done quite well. So it was those factors that we thought we need to look at development charges. We've done the study, and the results of that study are before you tonight. And we're looking forward to hearing any comments that members of the public have. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our treasurer, Stephanie Phillips. She may have some comments and to introduce the Watson and Associates who have undertaken the study.
Good evening. The town has undergone a development charges background study, which identifies anticipated development through a growth forecast. It identifies the forecasted development needs and addresses bylaw policy considerations and proposes development charges for the town. Please welcome Andrew Grenda and Nancy Neal of Watson and Associates, Economists Limited. Andrew Grenda is a principal at Watson and Associates. He has 26 years of experience with Watson and is a DC policy specialist. He's been involved with assessment and feedback related to Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act with the province. And we also have Tatham Engineering here, Bill Van Ryan and Phil Watts for project-specific questions. So I'll hand the floor over to Andrew to present the results of the development charges background study and bylaw policy considerations. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie, just for my information, should I share the presentation from my end, or will you be showing that on your side?
Yes, please go ahead and share the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as mentioned in the introduction, the intent of the presentation this evening is the statutory public meeting that's required under the Development Charges Act for a municipality to undertake before considering passing a development charges bylaw. Again, as mentioned earlier, notice has been given of the statutory public meeting. Also, in consideration of the requirements of the Development Charges Act, the background study and draft bylaw were made available back in December of 2022. It's a requirement that be available publicly at least 60 days before the bylaw is considered. So it has been in the public domain for quite some time in that regard. And the intent this evening is to hear from the public on the matter so that council can hear any questions or concerns that the public may have, and they can make considerations of any potential changes prior to considering the adoption of the bylaw, if it intends to do so. By way of introduction, development charges is a mechanism as was mentioned earlier, that's available to municipalities. And the intent of development charges is to have growth pay for growth, meaning that to the extent that there is an increase in need for service that's required because of new development, then that increase in service should be paid for by new development and not paid for by existing taxpayers who already have a sufficient level of service to meet their needs. And municipalities are empowered to impose these charges under the authority of the Development Charges Act. And these charges are a bit broader than the cost of development that developers usually have to pay as conditions of their development agreement. Those are commonly referred to as local services that directly benefit those specific developments. What the DC is meant to recover more broadly is the broader infrastructure requirements that the municipality, the municipal services that are required for the anticipated development. And so because these are broader in nature, they are apportioned amongst the broader development of the town in this case, and paid for through this mechanism. And so the development charges background study has a required methodology to identify what expected development is, what the demands of those services would be when we look beyond those local service requirements, and then to determine those capital costs and calculate a charge that can then be imposed to recover that increase in need for service. And the Act is quite prescriptive, as illustrated on this slide, as to the steps that must be followed and documented in the DC background study. So it looks at that anticipated development, identifies the increase in need for service, estimates those capital costs, and determines the share of those capital costs that benefit growth. Where if the project is going to benefit the existing community, then those have to be deducted from the calculation. And that ultimately informs the capital projects that will be funded by this source of funding. Once the charge is implemented through the bylaw, then the municipality imposes that, typically at the time of building permit issuance. Those monies are maintained in a reserve fund. And when those projects in the background study become part of the municipality's capital budget, this becomes a source of funding to the degree identified in the background study. So it is a very narrow source of funding that has to be used for those capital projects identified in the background study itself. And so the background study we prepared adheres to this methodology, provides the level of detail in alignment with that requirement. And the rest of the presentation today, I'd like to just summarize what's in that background study and the proposed bylaw. So the first step in this process is to look at what the anticipated development is for the town. The Act does not put limitations on the time period that can be considered. What we've done is we've looked at the harder services of water, wastewater, and roads over what's referred to as a build-out forecast. So with the help of Tatham Engineering, we've looked at the potential growth that can be achieved within the built boundary of the municipality. With that, the anticipated needs for services were then identified and considered over that build-out horizon for water, sewer, and roads. For all other services that were considered, we looked at a 20-year forecast period. And so the forecast that was identified was based on the town's official plan. It also had regard for the units in the development process that may already be registered or in approved plans, or for lands that are designated for development more broadly. Looking at those units in the development process and that land supply over the longer term, what we can see is that the municipality is expected to grow by approximately 2,500 additional persons over that longer period of time, with the development of about 1,345 additional dwelling units. When we look at those dwelling units, the majority of them are predominantly permanent dwelling units. About a little over or a little under 20% of them would also be inclusive of seasonal dwellings and other institutional types of residential dwellings. The anticipated population growth over that longer term is expected to average about 1% annual population growth per year. By comparison, between 2006 and 2021, population has grown by about 1.2% in the town. And then the growth also needs to consider not just residential development, but also non-residential development. And so, again, looking at the broader economic factors and considerations of the economy for the town, what's expected is that the employment jobs within the town will grow by just under 1,200 additional employees over that build-out forecast period, and that would require the construction of about 870,000 square feet of building area to facilitate that employment demand. And when we look at that mix, the predominant mix of about just under half would be in the form of commercial development, the other half in the form of industrial, institutional, and primary development. And so with that growth outlook, then, as required under the methodology, we then looked at all of the eligible services that you can see summarized on this table, considered with that level of development what impacts that would have on the respective services. And you can see by the bolded services, those that were identified for consideration in the background study. And when we look at those needs, as you'll see later in the presentation and detailed in the background study, the majority of the capital requirements and the impact of development will be for hard services, that being for water, wastewater, and services related to highways, commonly referred to as roads. Those needs have been developed in consultation with Tatham Engineering, who assisted us in looking at what the increase in need would be related to that level of development and the associated capital projects that would be needed to be undertaken to facilitate that level of development. These would include projects such as road reconstruction and urbanizations, intersection improvements for the water and wastewater system, including extensions or oversizing to water distribution and sewer collection systems, improvements to pumping stations or new pumping station requirements that may be involved. And again, that is the majority of the capital that you'll see identified in the background study. But in addition to that, the development, based on review of other municipal reports and discussions with staff, had identified additional needs for equipment for fire as the municipality grows, as well as ambulance, additional services related to libraries, parks, recreational facilities, and trail developments under Parks and Recreation, additional improvements for provincial offenses with respect to court services. So those are all identified in detail in the background study and identified the capital cost of the project, which in total are about $127 million, again, over that longer build-up horizon of approximately 35 years. And when we look at that total cost of about $127 million, you can see by the pie chart, there's a number of deductions that we have to account for, as we saw in the earlier illustration. There are deductions that are made to the trail extension project, recognizing that there is going to be some benefits beyond the 20-year forecast period that was identified. So those costs have been deferred until future development charges, when they would come into forecast at that point. Also, there's pretty significant deductions in here for grants, subsidies, and other deductions that relates to the Joint Recreation Center project, the anticipated grant funding and contribution from other municipalities towards that project. And while that funding has been identified, obviously we don't need to recover it twice, and it has been removed from the calculation in that regard. And so that leaves about $97 million in capital needs, again, over that longer term horizon. About 13% of the costs in the DC background study are deducted as a benefit to existing. And so this is reflective of the fact that with these improvements, there will be benefits to the existing community, either by replacing existing infrastructure or providing additional level of service benefits to them. That has been deducted and will be continue to be funded from non-DC sources like property taxation or water and sewer rates. And then the growth-related cost share then represents about just under 2/3 of the total capital needs, totaling about $80 million for that longer-term horizon. And when we drill down into that $80 million, what we can see again is that about 96% of the capital projects that make up that amount are for the hard service infrastructure of water, wastewater, and roads. Roughly 4 to 5% for all the other services that we discussed earlier. And so when we look at that anticipated capital needs in relation to the anticipated development, then that would suggest these calculated charges that would be imposed. Again, the charges are meant to be imposed on all types of development, meaning both residential and non-residential forms of commercial, industrial, and institutional. You can see from the calculation of the charge that the charges are imposed on a service-by-service basis. You'll see that it distinguishes between what we refer to as town-wide services and urban services. That meaning if there is development that is not occurring in the municipal water or wastewater service area, then those services would not apply, and only the town-wide portion of the charge would apply in those rural settings. You can also see from the calculation of the charge that to provide equity for the demand in service, the charge is determined on a per capita basis and then applied based on the type of residential dwelling that would be constructed. And that's informed by the occupancy of those dwelling unit types based on census data. So for example, when we look at a single and semi-detached unit in the fully urban service area with water and wastewater, the charge per unit would be $45,120 per unit. Again, imposed on new development only at the time of building permit issuance. You can see that the charge for other dwelling types, if it's other multiples such as road dwellings or townhouses, that charge would be lower, just under $35,000 a unit. For apartment dwelling units, depending on the number of bedrooms, larger apartments at about $33,700 per unit, and bachelor one-bedroom apartments at $20,000 per unit. To the far right, you can also see the charge for non-residential development, so those forms of commercial, industrial, and institutional in the fully serviced water and wastewater area would be a charge of just under $28 per square foot based on those calculations. And so those are the full calculated rates that the municipality would need to impose on all of the development that's forecast to be able to recover that $80 million in capital needs. If the municipality was to impose these charges, then there are a number of rules that have to govern their implementation. Some of them are statutorily required, meaning the municipality has to follow those rules under the Act and has no discretion in that regard. Others, council does have some discretion, which you'll see identified in a moment. So with respect to the charges that are proposed in the background study and in the draft bylaw, it's anticipated that the charges would be imposed at the time of building permit issuance. Council does have discretion to delay the recovery of those charges if they do so under an agreement or to accelerate them. The Act also requires that if the development is for rental housing or institutional development, that the municipality cannot fully impose that amount at the time of building permit issuance, but rather has to allow the applicant to pay that in 6 equal annual installments, commencing with the date of occupancy. The municipality is allowed to impose interest on those installments at a maximum rate of the prime interest rate plus 1%. Similarly, the Act also grandfathers in the charges as well. In one form, the way it does that is that when the building permit is issued, if that building permit is being issued as a result of a site plan or zoning bylaw amendment approval, and that approval's occurred within 2 years of the building permit being issued, then the charge is not calculated based on the rates at the time of building permit issuance, but rather those rates that were in effect when the planning application was submitted. So this could be charges being grandfathered in going back, potentially 3+ years, depending on the timing of that those applications. In addition to those imposition rules, there's also exemptions that municipalities have to adhere to. So these are types of developments that municipalities cannot impose development charges on because the Development Charge Act requires that they be exempt. So firstly, they cannot impose development charges on themselves or boards of education or other levels of municipal government. If there is an existing industrial building, that existing industrial building is allowed to expand up to 50% of its current floor area, and no additional DCs can be imposed on those on that construction. If there is existing residential dwellings or new dwellings, for that matter, they're allowed to add up to 2 additional units, as long as it's within a single detached, semi-detached, or row dwelling or ancillary to it on the same property. Also, colleges and universities are exempt from payment of development charges, as is non-for-profit housing. You'll also see on this slide that in addition to those exemptions, the More Homes Built Faster Act has also sought to exempt affordable housing and attainable housing. At the moment, we know that affordable housing will be any development that has a purchase price or a rental rate that's less than 80% of the average. This needs to be further defined by the province until it's imposed, or before it's imposed, in that they need to provide municipalities with what that average market rate will be. They have also identified that attainable housing will also be exempt from payment of development charges. Again, they need to further define that through regulation to identify which types of development will be considered attainable. But these are initiatives under the more recent amendment to the Development Charges Act that will be exempt. And I would just note here that under the Development Charges Act, these types of developments that are exempt cannot be made up, the shortfall of revenue cannot be made up by higher DCs on other types of development. It has to be funded by non-development charge sources, so principally from taxes or water and sewer rates. In terms of non-statutory exemptions, so these are the ones that council has discretion over. The non-statutory exemptions that are provided in here are fairly consistent with what we see in most municipalities, in that they seek to exempt places of worship or public hospitals from payment of development charges, as well as non-residential agricultural uses that have minor demands on municipal infrastructure, conservation authorities, seasonal structures, and other temporary units would also be exempt in that they don't demonstrate permanent demands for service. In addition to the exemptions that I mentioned earlier, it's also important to note in the bylaw that there are other reductions in the charges that are being calculated that the municipality will have to adhere to under the Development Charges Act. And again, these shortfalls will have to be made up from taxes and water and wastewater rates, in that they cannot be made up by higher development charges. The first reduction is for rental residential premises. So if there's a building that contains at least 4 residential dwelling units that are all intended to be rented, then that building is subject to a DC discount. And it's discounted based on the number of bedrooms within each unit. So if in that building there's a 3-bedroom or more unit, it has a 25% DC discount. If it's a 2-bedroom unit, it's a 20% discount. If it's a bachelor or 1-bedroom unit, the discount is 15% relative to the charge. Also, because the town is considering adopting a new bylaw after January 1st, 2022, there's a mandatory phase-in of the development charge. So the charges we presented earlier, if they were adopted by council this year, the first year of that bylaw, the maximum amount that can be imposed is 80% of that charge that was presented earlier. The second year would be 85%, 90% in year 3, and 95% of that full rate by year 4, with the full rate coming into effect not until the 5th year of that bylaw. And again, that shortfall in revenue to pay for that $80 million in capital projects will have to be made up from non-DC sources. And so a couple final policies that you'll see identified in the rules is related to what's referred to as redevelopment credits. So new development can occur on vacant land, but it can also occur for redevelopment activities of existing properties. What this acknowledges is that DCs should only be imposed where there is an incremental development that occurs. And so there are credits that are granted against those charges for something that's simply being replaced, as long as that replacement occurs within 5 years of the demolition. And lastly, in terms of the charges that are presented, those charges are denominated in current values today. The Act allows for those charges to be indexed without amendment over the term of the bylaw. So the bylaw has a 10-year term. Council can amend that bylaw at any time if it chooses to do so, but it also has the ability to adjust those charges with inflation based on the StatsCan index prescribed under the Act for that to occur on an annualized basis. And so when we look at the development charges that are presented and provide some context for them, you'll see in the next few slides, we've looked at different types of residential and non-residential development and compared those with development charges that are imposed in some of the surrounding area municipalities. What you'll see on the respective tables is that it looks at the total development charges payable. In some cases, those charges may be imposed by a single tier municipality or in environments where there's a lower tier and an upper tier municipality, both imposing those charges. There are also the ability of boards of education to impose education development charges. And so we've considered the total development charges that would be paid in these respective jurisdictions so we could get a sense of the total charges. And so what you'll see on this first comparison table is looking at the charges that are calculated for a single detached unit, as we saw earlier, at around $45,000 a unit. The first year that that bylaw is imposed, that charge would be 80% of that amount, so $36,100 approximately per unit. And when we look at that by comparison to other municipalities, that's comparable to the charges we see in certain areas in Severn. It's about $5,000 per unit less than what is currently being charged in some of the area municipalities in Simcoe County, and about $10,000 higher than what we see in the area municipalities in the Muskoka district. Also, when we look at a higher density building, so an apartment building with a unit with 2 or more bedrooms, again, we can see that the first year charge would be around $26,000 per unit. That charge, again, is comparable with areas in Severn, for which charges are imposed in the urban serviced area. The charge is about $9,000 to $10,000 higher per unit than we see in the District of Muskoka. Again, more comparable to what we see generally in the county of Simcoe. In terms of non-residential, what you'll see in the next 2 slides, the first looking at what would the charge be on a per square foot basis, and then the total charge that would be imposed on a 1,000 square foot development. The first looking at a commercial development, and in both cases, as you'll see in the next slide as well for industrial, the calculated charges for Parry Sound would be higher than those of the comparators. Again, this is largely reflective of the intensity of the capital program for water, wastewater, and roads. These charges, about 99% of them are for those three services. Very little of the charge for non-residential is actually going towards the other services of fire, of parks, recreation, and so forth. It's largely for water, wastewater, and roads. And so when we look at the charge at $22.39 per square foot, that again is higher than the municipal comparators, principally those in Simcoe County, and much higher than those that we see in the District of Muskoka. You'll also note in this comparison that the municipalities at the bottom, Gravenhurst and Bracebridge, the lower tier municipalities, do not impose development charges for non-residential. So that's a decision that those councils have made to forego that source of funding for growth-related capital and to have that paid for by non-DC sources, as I mentioned earlier. And with industrial, again, we see that the charge at $22.39, a bit more comparable to those in Simcoe County than in the District of Muskoka. Again, we can see that there's further discounting for industrial as compared to commercial when we look at the municipalities of Tay and North Bay, where the lower tier municipalities exempt industrial while they choose to impose it on commercial. And also in Greater Sudbury, where they reduce the non-water and wastewater component of the charge for industrial as well. And so that is a summary of our background study for the public meeting this evening. As I mentioned in the introduction, the intent is to receive input from the general public, so council can hear from them before considering if any further revisions or amendments are required. And then it's proposed that this bylaw would come forward to council for their potential consideration on March 21st to consider adopting that bylaw. And so that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, thank you. Do any members of council have questions of clarification from Mr. Grunda? No? You're pondering, Councilor Ornament. You got one?
So, Mr. Grunda, these numbers are all based on proposed development at this time?
That's correct. So it's based on, it's informed by developments that are proposed, but again, it looks at a longer growth horizon by looking at the municipality's official plan, the designated lands for development, and the potential yield from that land supply. So again, it's a longer term forecast that extends out to approximately about a 35-year period.
So what happens to the numbers if there is more or less development than is proposed?
It's a good question. So again, because the way the Act is identified in terms of the methodology, it looks at the anticipated development and the associated increase in need. So if that development ends up happening quicker than anticipated, then presumably what that means is that the capital timing would be accelerated to meet the needs of development. And similarly, if development slows, then presumably those projects may delay in terms of the associated time.
And one last one for me. So we have the hard costs for roads, sidewalks, water and sewer are the largest component of this. Is this applied differently in a subdivision where the developer is installing that infrastructure than in a place where it's an infill where some or all of that infrastructure might exist now?
No. So the key distinction between those two types of development is that, as I mentioned in the introduction, if there's subdivision development, then developers, as a condition of their development agreement, would place that local infrastructure. So that typically means they're emplacing the smaller diameter local water and wastewater collection systems internal to their plan of subdivision, as well as their internal road network. What the DC is attempting to identify is, what is the broader main extensions outside of those local systems that would be required, or the oversizing of existing systems, the improvement to intersections outside of those subdivisions. And so those are collectively impacted by development, whether that's in a subdivision or in infill environments. And that's why the DC is intending to share those costs and install them.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, so now we have, thank you, Mr. Grunda. We do have questions. We have some presentations from the public. And our first one I have logged here is Vanessa Bachman. So. Welcome.
Testing, testing. You can hear me? Good evening, everyone, the public. My name is Vanessa Bachman. I live in the town of Parry Sound at 64 Gibson Street. On receiving a copy of a letter written by Mr. Hassel of Hassel Holdings, a sense of duty compelled me to participate in this public meeting and read part of his letter for the public to hear, hoping more people will provide follow-up input to this matter, a matter that many may not have been aware of how devastating the implications will be on the survival of the town of Parry Sound. My intent is to actually beg council to perform extensive deliberations with all levels of partners in order to develop an alternate. This is no way to survive. If this is passed, many people will not be able to survive or thrive in the town of Parry Sound. I will begin to read Mr. Hassel's initial 2-page document, though I would like to read it all. I believe there are others in attendance that have a vested interest and deserve to be heard. Please note, when I begin reading this letter, the term I referenced here is not myself, Vanessa Bachman. I am reading the letter on behalf of Mr. Hassel of Hassel Holdings. Proposed Parry Sound development charges dated February 28th, 2023. I have studied with great interest the recent report on development charges. The following is a candid discussion on the consequences and potential impact. I have presented some of the impacts and questions to be addressed before any final decisions are made. As some of you may know, I have lived through the very birth of the city of Mississauga. I owned numerous parcels of land in that area. You might say that land development is in my blood. Over the last 50 years, I have bought, sold, and developed land all over the broader GTA. Today, I own a handful of properties inside the town of Parry Sound and in several of the adjacent townships. Clearly, I have a vested interest in seeing the town grow. The magnitude of the proposed new development charge places every residence and business at financial risk. It is our view that this charge will limit or even eliminate both business and residential growth at a time Parry Sound needs to present itself as the most desirable and affordable place to build. Should our forecasts come to pass, the town should expect to see a collapse in both residential and commercial activity. The town should expect to see falling property values. In this nightmare scenario, is the town prepared to hike tax rates? The current residential tax rate is 1.69%, is one of the highest in the province. This needs to be considered before any DC charge irreparably harms the local economy. The DC impact will be swift, and the effects, even if it is reversed, will be long-lasting. Secondly, Parry Sound should be adopting a development philosophy of always maintaining a development cost advantage to its regional neighbors to ensure it gets more than its fair share of development interest and projects. I cannot think of a greater gift to neighboring township development than the implementation of a DC at this time. I have not taken the time to create this discussion for any other reason than to try to stop the town from an oncoming development disaster of its own making. Over the years, I have purchased land in this community because I see its potential. I have waited and expected Parry Sound to grow like the surrounding communities. It has not. It's long past time we have a public discussion of why. This must be explored and addressed before any new and significant barriers are introduced. The town is projecting to spend money that it does not have. It cannot expect 50 new residences a year and nominal population growth to carry the millions of dollars of capital shortfalls the town anticipates. Customers get to choose where, how they develop, as the study has ignored them all at the town's peril. Parry Sound should be the city of the north. There is no need to lose 319 acres of farmland every day when we are so close with such a limited environmental impact from both residential, commercial, and even industrial expansion, and thousands of acres to utilize. The downtown needs growth desperately. COVID has changed the face of business and they need new customers to survive. Rental and non-rental housing development is critical to getting and retaining a workforce. A developer normally pays the cost of sanitary sewers, stormwater, roads, sidewalks, retention ponds, streetlights, and even land for parks. Do you honestly think a DC is going to be accepted in addition to these costs? To achieve the status of the city of the north, the town needs an achievable vision and that the will to be innovative in how it gets there. You simply cannot do the same things and expect new results. I am told by developers that Huntsville, Bracebridge, and Gravenhurst have a vision to give them a roadmap of how to develop to their potential. We all know what the town has to offer and the assets it has that should be leveraged. Does the council have the will to finally be innovative in its thinking and stop pretending to accept what other towns do as a roadmap? Every town in the province faces similar issues, and every one of them is looking at its neighbors to see what it can copy. Innovation comes from within. Municipalities are lousy at innovation. Parry Sound needs a Parry Sound solution. No town will survive if its children must leave. Parry Sound is now at this point. Raising the cost to grow here is not the short-term answer. The good news is that there is an answer. You must be prepared to change the way you operate to get it. Lastly, to anyone reading this document and feeling a need to nitpick the numbers, you are missing the entire point and are likely looking to justify your position rather than evolve it. The simple message is this: the town will not grow by raising the cost to do so at this time in history. I and other members of the business community are available to assist the town if experience and constructive input will form part of any new Made in Parry Sound solution. Sincerely, Harry Hassel. As a note to myself, when I think about this, I think about the alternate. There is an alternate, and I believe that wholeheartedly. It will require change, perhaps even sacrifice. When I look at the great leaders who sacrificed themselves for their people, I am reminded of Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Gandhi, Joan of Arc, Nelson Mandela, and Louis Riel. I believe this type of sacrifice may be the only solution, and I believe it will leave a much bigger legacy than any 6-lane pool could ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Morton. Welcome, John.
Thank you, members of council and the public, for your time. I applied to speak today very late in the game, and so I appreciate your time. I'll try to keep it brief. I work for Greystone Project Management. We've had developments in this town for well over a decade, successful ones. And this request tonight from our perspective is just to for council to consider deferring this decision and kicking it down the road to reconsider the content of the DC background study, to receive commentary from the development community. Admittedly, and I realize it was posted publicly when the dates were said, I did not realize, and we did not realize it was this far along in the process. And so our fault, I guess, but I only started looking at this document yesterday, and it's 500 pages. It's massive. There is an enormous list of projects, and we do have comments, feedback, and concerns with the projects on the list. We would like to engage with the town and their consultants to find out more about these projects. And the reason is this, and I'll tell a bit of a story. I actually worked for a municipality over 10 years ago, earlier in my career. It was a municipality from down south, the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury. We were going through a massive stage of growth and did not have the development charges collected to support the growth that was coming. And, you know, we had to do a major update to the DC background study. Now, what we did was we engaged with all of the developers. We had roundtable meetings. We talked to them about the charges. They were, you know, from the developer's perspective, crazy high, unaffordable, all of those things. What you have to remember is the DC charge is made up of a pile of assumptions. Now, they're reasonable assumptions from, you know, Tatham Engineering's perspective, they're reasonable assumptions from Watson's perspective, but they can be challenged and they can be changed. So the cost of projects, the timing of projects, the scale of development, the timing of development, all affects this rate at the end of the day. And that's how that rate is developed, is a pile of projects. So I mean, I do think that we can help solve this problem. The development community can help solve this problem. We need to be engaged. We need to be part of the communication. We can get our consultants involved as well, and perhaps help solve this problem. I totally understand the need for dealing with these infrastructure issues in the future, and a development charge is a very, you know, well-utilized methodology to do so. I think from the town of Parry Sound's perspective, they have to think about it from now sitting in the developer's seat. We have land in other municipalities that have charges that are nowhere near this. These charges and the challenges we have in town of Parry Sound with our properties, which include, I mean, you're dealing with granite on every single property, an enormous amount of granite. You're dealing with poor soils. You're dealing with potentially even contamination on a number of sites that the town of Parry Sound wants to see developed. These challenges, on top of a large DC charge, make many projects unviable. When I look at these charges and compare them to projects we've done in the past, it would render those projects not viable. And they were great projects for the town. They added to the tax base significantly. And that's going to be one of the solutions you need, is to continue to add to the tax base to reduce what is currently a very high tax rate here. We want to be a part of that discussion, and we would like to provide feedback. So that's our request, is to at least provide more time to debate this further. A few other points that were already made, I'll just go through a few notes, which we plan to submit at a later date in a more formal manner, is I think a comparable to Muskoka area municipalities is pretty relevant. You know, it is difficult there too. There's granite there. There's all the same problems. And, you know, I think to come in higher than Muskoka area municipalities is going to be a challenge for continuing to encourage growth in the town of Parry Sound. On top of that, understand that these charges are simply passed along to the end user. So if you're selling a unit, an affordable unit at that, or an attainable unit, the higher the DCs are, the higher the price of that unit. And so in a very direct way, the decision that town council makes on the development charges is actually potentially contributing to exacerbating an unaffordability, this affordability crisis we have, if you make the wrong decision. At the same time, if you can help or figure out a way to help alleviate these charges or deal with them in an easier manner, you can help encourage more development here and deal with that affordability issue and that supply and demand issue that's causing this affordability crisis in every single municipality around. Like this is a very common discussion topic. And I mean, I don't think you'd find many developers that don't think that growth should pay for growth. That is a very common saying at the DC table, but we're not saying that is not correct. That is definitely correct. We just want to make sure that it's to scale with the developments and also actually achievable, that we can continue building here. I had mentioned previously just that that the DC background study is immense, and that's why we're asking for a little bit more time. We'd love to have discussions, you know, between our consultants and yours to try to answer some questions. And at the end of the day, I guess I'll just leave you with we want to work with the town of Parry Sound to help you achieve your goals in this town. I think we do collectively have the same goals at the end of the day, and we can help solve the same problems. But if it's significantly cheaper to develop somewhere else and to do our project somewhere else, we have to spend our limited time and resources where it makes the most sense. So this is a huge part of that equation. These are very large fees that we're looking at right now, and they're pretty scary from our perspective, to be totally honest. They kill a few of our future projects outright, and would make us look somewhere else in the near term for development. So I appreciate your time and thank you for hearing my feedback, and I hope there's just future discussions down the road on this.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Councilor Borneman? This is a different type of public meeting, so not like our usual ones. So
Right. No, Mr. Morton kind of just escaped on me, but I want to know how much time we need to enter into these conversations and get to ground zero here. Like I'm glad to see you here tonight and to hear you out. I'm glad, you know, oftentimes we do official plans and rezoning bylaws, and it's only after the fact that you get the input. So I'm glad that you're here tonight, but how long of a delay are we talking about here? You know, a month, 6 months, you know?
I mean, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, that's a great question. And to be honest, I feel unprepared for this meeting as it stands because I tried to absorb as much as I could in the last 24 hours. That being said, the 2-week window to council ratifying this decision is nowhere near what is needed. I think we could likely get a number of questions answered in a few months. But in reality, considering there's other parties, including us, that are very interested in the same discussion, and they need to be involved as well. I mean, actually, there was another developer in town that brought this to my attention. I just got a text message and, did you know this was going to council tomorrow night? And I didn't. And so I think a 3 to 6 month window, I have to think that's enough time to deal with this. That's my view. If everybody's working together, I mean, we've worked with your consultants at Tatham before, and I know that there's a productive conversation that can happen there. They've just done, I'm sure, a pile of work on this, and so I'm assuming that they can likely answer a number of questions pretty rapidly. At this point, you know, there's like I'll give you a random example, but there's a $16 million wastewater project, sanitary pump station listed. I have no idea what that's for, who it services, why it's $16 million. I would love to know more about that project and why it's on the DC list. It's a huge proportion of the wastewater charge, and the wastewater charge is a huge proportion of the total DC charge. So what's the timing of that? What are the assumptions that underpin that, and why is it on the list? And I mean, we have that same question about a number of other projects. We haven't had the time because we weren't paying attention to be able to put together those questions in a formal way and present them to you.
it's a good question, and I just asked Mr. Harris what our timeline is on, you know, having to bring this back for, you know, the approval of the bylaw to get it done. Mr. Harris, maybe you can explain what this, because I would like to see that meeting with some of the key developers in the community to have that conversation. Because I think you understand we do need to do what we're doing, but you know, what is the real cost on this? So Mr. Harris, can you explain where we're at and how this could take place?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to say we're here obviously to listen to the comments. We've got a lot of written comments. We've had some of the, your comments and others. We weren't sure what response we would get. Actually, more input is better, because sooner or later this all becomes real, either when you're writing a check or at this point. The plan was to bring the bylaw forward to March 21st. That, and I think based on the comments and the concerns, we recognize we're not going to get the answers, and we may never get everybody's comfortable, but I think we need to push the March 21st date out. The question is how far, and you worked in Bradford, I worked in Vaughan, and often what we did, I was there over 15 years in the finance department, and every year we had development charges. Every time we did an update, it went through without any issues from the development industry. And the key there was they had appointed representatives who represented their interests and had some ability to enter and agree. Now, it would, what forum are we going to be meeting with yourself, and then meeting with somebody else at another date? And I don't know that it's a consensus thing, but it'd be, what form of that will that discussion take? And if somebody's not at the table, then we're still back maybe to square one and somebody not being happy. So I'm not sure how that would be organized. I think the town's willing to talk to the development industry, because I think there's some misunderstandings based on some of the information I read. I mean, this is a new topic for this area. Some of the developers that develop elsewhere, like you're talking about in Muskoka, you understand there's development charges, the need for development charges. You're just questioning maybe the magnitude here. I think not the principle. Others are questioning the principle of development charges. So there's some improvements and discussion we can have to get people close to on the same page, if not exactly on the same page.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that sentiment. I mean, I would say that this meeting, in all of the previous public notifications or whatever has gone out on the website, all of that stuff didn't really catch anybody's attention. This meeting did. You've got us now. So what we did, the town of Bradford is a small town. When I worked there, we were tiny, and it was coming. Development was coming faster than we could deal with. We couldn't hire enough staff. We just felt like little old Bradford, and suddenly we had to build a 400 series interchange, and the MTO told us that was our project to deal with, $54 million project at the time, and like that was pretty, unbelievable to us. And we'll give you a third of the money, and you guys build it. So it was a similar thing. We were just making up the process from scratch. What's the best way to deal with this? And we invited just the development community publicly, and any members of the public, to come to a roundtable meeting. And actually, we had probably 40 people there, because at the time, Metris and all the big guys from down there, they were quite keen on the area. And so you could do something similar. There will be nowhere near the size of group as that. And you can also just give more time for us collectively to submit formal comments, like we should have done in the last 60 days, but we didn't. So, at least I would kick the public notification period 60 days down the road and let us submit comments, because I feel like we're starting from zero right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good enough. Okay. Councilor McCann had a question, and then Councilor Barnwell.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. You articulated everything very, very well. I think we're all on the same page that we know that growth needs to pay for growth. And so I have a couple of questions for you. So what would your response be to what Mr. Harris said at the beginning of this meeting, when we talked about the fact that we had no development charges for a long time? And we didn't have the growth, and now we're suggesting that we need these development charges, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So that's one of my questions. Well, how would you answer that?
That is a great point. And I keyed on that comment because we have our own perspective on that. Parry Sound has been attractive for us because of no development charges because of that. Now, it's offset by the larger cost here. Typically, the lighthouse is a great example. I mean, the amount of rock we had to blast to create that building was more than we've ever by multiples, more than we've ever dealt with. You know, the remaining lands in Parry Sound are challenging, to say the least. There are contaminated properties. There are so many challenges to deal with. And so it was an attractive place to invest. We've recently made a significant investment in this town and acquired additional lands. I mean, so it stung to see the charges because we already know we've got a hill to climb. And so our immediate sort of visceral reaction was like, well, maybe we just got to let those things sit there for a few years and, you know, wait till the climate changes or something. I don't know. But I tell you, it was an attractive place for us for years. And that's why we've been here. So it doesn't mean that it's not now. I get development charges. I understand that. It just was a surprise to us, the scale of them.
I guess where Sudbury has been known as the nickel capital of the world, we must be the granite capital.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah.
So if you take some of the, when you're saying that neighboring municipalities, and we've been compared to them in so much as apples and oranges, and aside from comparing us to Muskoka, a lot of our own neighboring municipalities don't have the infrastructure to develop that we have. And that's part of what we're dealing with, plus our constricted boundaries. And so we have a lot of anomalies that we are dealing with. I guess, so my last question then to you is if there are other municipalities that are charging similar types of development charges and are surviving and growing. So what would your answer be? Maybe perhaps you've already answered it with the issues that we're dealing with here. But you know, why would places like you know, Midland, Owen Sound, other, you know, towns in either northern or southern, anywhere?
I honestly think that it's probably a more complicated analysis related to market conditions in those areas. I mean, the thing on the flip side of this, and the reason that there is a conservative approach to the timing of projects, the cost of projects, is because mistakes have been made in other municipalities in the past. Collingwood is the shining example right now of what can happen if these things are not planned for. Mm-hmm. We've had meetings in the district of Muskoka with local municipalities, and the conversation was, we're worried you're not planning the expansions in time for us to get there, for us to have capacity allocation at them, you know, and servicing for our developments. You know, we've been in discussions with them for over a year, and now we've got a solution to those problems, which is great. And it came through these sort of two-way conversations with the development community. The problem that the town of Parry Sound is now facing is we've got to pay for all this infrastructure somehow. But you're saying it's too expensive, so you're not going to actually develop. So even though the study, the wording of the council report, the wording of everything is saying, look, we got to do these, we've got to collect these fees to create these projects to encourage growth. The problem is the fees are so high that you're actually going to do the opposite. And I think that's a challenge. You got to find a balancing point there that works for everybody. And like Clayton accurately said, we may not get on the exact same page with everything, but I think we can get closer. And I think that's the goal.
So with that in mind, Mr. Mayor, I think that there's an appetite here in the room tonight that we definitely want to work together. And I certainly would support deferring this. I don't want to put it off for a long time, but
we're not discussing the motion right now. This is just the public meeting. So we'll discuss that when we get to it.
Okay, well, I'm just anxious.
So before I go to Council Borneman, okay.
Thank you, by the way.
I want to ask John a question. That is, do you think you could have, if we brought this back to the first meeting in May, do you think you and the other developers could collectively get together, have a meeting, and then have a meeting with our staff and Tatham and Andrew, Grinda, and that sort of thing, so we can collectively come together, hopefully refine these numbers and work something out?
I think
that's
we can,
possible?
I think we can make forward progress in that time for sure.
Okay,
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to just make that plan, at least schedule some kind of meeting 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Maybe towards the end of May or March. And then there's enough time to have some correspondence.
Okay.
And there's also a month's time before that meeting for, Tatum and Watson's to discuss some of that feedback and see where that goes.
all right. We're gonna go to Councilor Borneman now on that, and then we'll deal with the actual question of during when we have the resolution to deal with timing or the actual formal part of it. So Councilor Borneman.
Great, thank you.
That was part of what I was gonna ask for. The other part is there's nothing with the province or Development Charges Act or whatever that we're going beyond what's required. We're not setting ourselves up for another 60-day notice period or anything like that, Mr. Harris. We can do this with the local developers or the developers who come to the meeting at least, and proceed out of that meeting forward to bringing this back to the table without any other delays or impediments.
Through the mayor to Councilor Borneman. That's correct. We're not in violation of any timelines if we delay it according to what the mayor was suggesting.
The only thing I would add to that is let's get the meetings going sooner rather than later. Let's not wait till the day after the notice expires to do this. Let's get started and get on with it.
Thank you. Mr. Morton, thank you very much for your
Thank-
presentation.
Thank you all.
And the conversation. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Next presentation, Mr. Hall. You could say what he said and.
Well, I'm glad I texted him.
Did you?
Thank you. Good evening, your worship and members of council. Yeah, really glad that John led, and really glad I was the guy that texted him yesterday. So I'm similar to John. I was made aware of this, how far along this actually was just over the weekend when I, got the letter from Mr. Hassel and read through that, then proceeded to go to the website. 569 pages later, cruise through that a little bit. So for me, it was it's pretty new thing. So this morning I sort of was reflecting. I think I'm going to take just a bit of a side, like a different direction than John, because I think this is important for people to understand the implications of these development charges. I'm just going to focus on rentals and affordability right now. I think that's important for you guys for everybody to understand. So at first, when I saw $33,651 for a 2-bedroom unit, I had to read that a few times because I actually thought I was not interpreting something properly. So when I do, but I think I think it's actually $33,651 per 2-bedroom unit. So if we break that down, I'm just going to break that down for everybody. That needs to get passed along to the end consumer, which is the tenant. So $33,651. If as a landlord, I'm going to pass that on, and I don't think, 12 years at 6% interest. I don't know if these are unreasonable numbers. We can argue those, but that's $353 a month times 12 months. So the rough math, and I'm not an economist, just a common sense person that's a big number. So what does that mean to my tenant? So that equates to $4,200 per year. That's after tax income. So the way the math works is you're supposed to ideally spend 30% of your after-tax household income on housing. whether it's a mortgage payment or rent, whatever it is, that's sort of the rule of thumb. So if I needed $4,200 of after-tax income, that's $14,000 a year I would need to earn. Because remember, 30% of 14,000 is 4,200. It's pre-tax, that's $20,000 a year, assuming you're in a 30% tax base. So if I'm a landlord, I need to pass that on. I'm the tenant. Now I need to make $20,000 more a year per household to afford that $33,651 for a 2-bedroom apartment. It's 10 of 2,000 hours a year. That's $10 an hour. I got to go to my boss and get a raise for $10 an hour. Or I got to get a side job, get a side hustle, make another 20 grand. That's pretty tough. If I'm making 20 bucks an hour, I got to work another 1,000 hours. So these are the numbers. So I just want you to reflect on these numbers. I know that you're going to see up there, I see Huntsville, Bracebridge, Gravenhurst. I see, we talked about, I think Harry talked in his letter about, looking at what our neighbors do. Well, it doesn't mean they're right either. Like, you hear a lot of chatter and there's a lot of advocacy in those communities to drop development charges entirely for rentals. And so I just think you really need to strongly consider that. So I'm just going to kind of defer from what John covered. I think all this other thing hopefully gets worked out in the wash. I'm not necessarily against development charges. I do strongly feel that our topography has always been our development charge in Parry Sound. We don't have DCs. We got CSs, Canadian Shield. And that's sort of always been, the tough thing here to deal with. So that's always sort of been the dialogue around that. So, development charges have always, over the past, we've said, we don't have them, but we have rock, right? So we just need to strongly consider that as well. Anyway, I'll leave on that. I can certainly sympathize with the situation that we're in as the town of Parry Sound. When I say this, we, like, collectively, like, the town supports churches, schools, hospital, Stocky, Bobby Orr, like, zero tax dollars generated from these. Yet I live in McDougall. I come into Parry Sound and I get to enjoy these at a lower tax rate. And that's not right. That's not fair. So I think there's a larger conversation, I think, that you really start to need to be looking at. And I'm not against the development charges, but they're far too high. We need to really pare these down. And it appears to me that this report is very centric on the amount of debt or the amount that we've accumulated, but as well as what we need to overcome. And it's sort of centered on that. And they've done some backwards magic math here to break it down and based on some assumptions, but they're far too high. So you're going to be able to collect some possibly with development charges, but that's not going to eliminate the bigger conversations that need to be taking place with some of these surrounding municipalities. I'll leave it at that.
Right. Any questions for Mr. Hall? Councillor Ashford?
Mr. Hall, just recognizing your ability to put a good team together, can you give an opinion on how long you would need, noting that we probably can't wait for everyone to get back from warmer weather, but what do you think would be a good time frame in your perspective?
My travel schedule is done for the year. I'm all in. So, like, I'll meet anytime. And I think we all work pretty well together. So we're all hustling all the time. So you just tell us a date and I think you'll see us all show up. So I think a couple months out is not unreasonable.
Thanks. Councillor Barnum?
I just ask these gentlemen, they're probably more in tune with than what we are in some aspects with the development community. So if there are other people that aren't on our list, it should be on our list. spread the word, get them to the table so the conversations can be fulsome and thorough.
I just sort of want you to, sorry.
Yeah,
through,
go ahead.
Just, I don't know who you want to speak to with regards to affordability and rental. You want to partake that on your own. I just really think that's an important one. And I'm happy to share you my costs and spreadsheets and like, I'll show you the numbers. It's not there.
Mr. Harris has a.
Just through the mayor on that topic, I believe Mr. Grunda, and it's in the presentation that under the changes the development charges legislation this December, affordable and attainable, there's either reductions or exemptions. And is Mr. Grunda, are you you could just comment?
Yes, so yeah, to that point, so currently if there is purpose-built rental developments, and so that's buildings that have at least 4 units for rental, there are DC discounts. So the rates that are presented here that would be phased in would be further discounted between 15 to 25%, depending on the number of bedrooms in the unit. So that's in place currently. Also, if there is rental development that occurs that is at what's deemed to be affordable, which is 80% of the average market rent, then the DCs would be fully exempt. So there would be no DCs paid on rental units that are being rented at 80% of the average market rent. And similarly, if there was any development for ownership, if it was at 80% of the average purchase price, DCs would be fully exempt as well. And when I say fully exempt, what that means is, again, the revenue you'd be collecting from DCs to pay for the infrastructure of growth would now be paid for by existing taxpayers.
Yep.
So I just want to put that in context.
Okay, so with all due respect, I live this world. We've seen in 30-40% increases in costs due to inflationary pressures, coupled with rising interest rates. So to put this in perspective, what you used to be able to build 5 years ago and rent at the same return on investment and charge $1,800 to $2,000 a month. Fast forward 5 years, you need $2,600 to $2,800 a month. And you're not even getting the same return on investment. That's just sort of the top end. So we're already at the top end of just due to the simple cost of construction and the cost of money. Adding any development charge to that will more or less could possibly be the breaking point of not any more rentals constructed. There's all kinds of CMHC programs around affordability. They don't line up with those 80% numbers that you spoke of. They're different numbers now. So that's not even in check with the CMHC MLI Select program. But like I said, I'm happy to show you numbers. I can show you costs. I can show you return on investments. I can show you interest, and you'll look at it and you'll go, yeah, I get it. It's simple math, but that's the reality. I just want you to be aware of that.
That's part of the discussion that can be had.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Hall? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, those were all the people that I had listed that were asked to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to address council with respect to the proposed development charges bylaw? Sure.
Hi,
Hi. Welcome.
I'm Damian Riley. I used to volunteer on the tourism marketing board up here. That was a decade ago. At that point, 86 cents of every dollar in this economy was generated by tourism. So I'd like to offer to council that if you're going to expand the consultation process, that perhaps also including, and it may have occurred already, I only learned about the meeting at 5:30 tonight. So bottom line is you may want to include a discussion with the RTO and the Muskoka Tourism Board to see what the impact would be. As a past marketer myself, it's very easy for a consumer to walk by this township and go to another township. And as Mr. Hall suggested, as Ms. Backman's letter suggested, that resident who could come here could live 10 minutes away and still use the services in this community, which does have an impact on the tax base of the township of Parry Sound. So I think that attitude and spirit of being a progressive provider as a regional hub for the greater area is important to consider in the respect of attracting people to this community. And a second point to that, I think we do have to acknowledge this is a regional hub. And I think the second group that should be seriously considered to participate in that stage 2 discussion is potentially some cost recovery on development charges for the infrastructure that Parry Sound has, that neighboring community residents use of the services here. So perhaps the studies could be expanded to include and look at that. And that would just be my comments from what I've heard here tonight. So,
Thank you.
cheers.
Thanks. Good. Anyone else? I see other developers in the room. You want to say something? What he said? Okay. All right. Ms. Phillips, have there been any letters received as a result of this notice?
Yes, we've received the following items of correspondence last week, which have been included in the report under item 911 and circulated with the agenda as part of the public record. They're from Frank Camanzuli, Harry Hassel, Bill Connor. Also, today we received and circulated to council correspondence from John Morton and Kirby Hall. And that's everything.
Okay, thank you. So if there are any further comments, okay, that members of the public would like to make, all right, would certainly urge you to provide them as soon as possible. I did have a date here, but I think that date's going to get changed. So, but as soon as possible would be great. Council will consider the public input and adopt or amended development charges bylaw at its discretion at the council meeting scheduled. Now it looks like it's going to be a different date. So we'll determine that when we discuss the actual resolution. And anyway, I really want to thank everyone for their conversation. I think it's been good. And I think the conversation is going to lead us to, I think, a better place where we can grow and develop and move forward with the things that we want to do and provide that better community, and also provide the services that we know need to be fixed or expanded or that sort of thing, and or grow. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for their attention tonight. It's greatly appreciated. Mover and seconder to adjourn this particular meeting, Councilor McCann, Councilor Ashford. We now declare the public meeting closed. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're going to go right to 911 so that we can freshen everyone's memory. So it's moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Ashford, whereas the development charges background study was made publicly available on December 28th, 2022. And whereas notice of public meeting was provided through local newspaper circulation on February 9th, 2023, as well as the town's website. Now therefore, council receives the development charges background study provided by Watson and Associate Economists Limited, and that council directs the development charges background study and development charges bylaw be placed on the March 21st, 2023 council meeting agenda for approval. So at this point, some discussion. Council McCann.
Well, I was going to suggest that we certainly can receive the report as we've heard tonight, but I think that we're all, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I would like to see that we defer this for a later date as we've been talking.
I don't think we need to defer it. I think all we need to do is amend this particular resolution
All right, well, that's fine.
to the
Okay,
later.
sure.
date.
Okay,
Okay. And what is the meeting and first meeting in May? May 16th. First meeting? May 2nd. May 2nd. Okay. All right. So that would be to the May 2nd meeting.
and I guess I would ask that this should be enough time. Certainly, we don't want to let this rest too long.
No, and I think we got the feedback that that should be good.
Right.
Are you seconding that, Council Bordeman?
Like
With comment? Okay, go ahead.
Like to see.
Yeah,
Excuse me, that there be some options and I guess potential impacts of those options included, so as there are alternatives rather than just a black and white.
oh, yes, yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think staff got that. Okay. All right, so May 2nd, you said?
Yes.
Okay,
Excuse me.
Yep.
When you said that, is the proposal to include that as part of the amendment? With options and potential impacts of options?
I think we'll do some direction afterwards. I think will probably be more appropriate. We'll deal with the amendment and this particular resolution, and then we'll deal with the other after. Okay. So the amendment is that March 21st be changed to May 2nd. All in favor of that? That's carried. And any discussion on the resolution as amended? All in favor then? And that's carried. Councilor Berman, do you want to make your amendment or your direction now, please? Sorry.
No
Yeah.
problem. No, I just asked that we direct staff to include a number of options and what they believe would be the potential impact of each of those options would be in the materials that come back to us.
Yeah.
Not sure if I'm explaining that very well, but it seems like we have an array of opinions and we're gonna have to land someplace.
And I
On
think that's going to be discussed when they have those meetings with the developers.
Thank you.
Seconder for that, Councilor Ashford. Okay. Any comment on that direction? All in favor then? Good, that's carried. Okay. All right. Again, thank you, everybody, for your input. I was hoping that you might ask a question during the public meeting. Hmm? Yep. Mr. Harris can answer that.
Yeah, through the mayor. The intent was never to double up. You wouldn't pay the fees and charges that you're referring to. I think it's 23,000 and development charges. So you wouldn't be, the town's not intended to double up on that. That's right. Yeah, I don't think it's that straightforward, but they won't be charged double.
You won't be charged.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. All right, now, where are we with the agenda?
Questions of staff.
Questions of staff, yes. Anyone have any questions of staff? Counselor Keith.
Yes, I have a question for Miss McNamara. And what I'm wondering, are things all in place for the March break? I see certainly indications of what is happening, but has there been any last minute changes or is everything on target there?
Through your worship. Thank you, Councillor Keith. At this point in time, all plans are going ahead for the Bobby Orr Community Center, Charles W. Stockey Center, and the library this year. There's a bit of a tri-party partnership. Everything's a go.
Councilor McDonald.
I have a question for Ms. McNamara as well. Regarding the recruitment for the lifeguards for Wabano Beach. Can we get an update on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, things are progressing well. Resumes are coming in, not as fast and furious as we'd like. We are interviewing. If anybody knows of anybody, this is my opportunity for a commercial right now. Please get your resumes in to be a lifeguard at Wabano Beach this summer.
Any other questions? Councillor McCann.
Yeah, just to follow up then, have you found that since the worst of COVID is behind us, and maybe not everyone would agree with that statement, but there was a point where finding qualified people to apply for the job, are you finding that that there's a better resource pool out there now?
Through your worship, Life Saving Society has been very active in hosting various courses for people to get certified to become lifeguards. Our hope is that everybody's taken advantage of these courses. As I mentioned previously, resumes are coming in. We are interviewing. It is early in the season. The push is still on.
You agree? Thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Correspondence, Ms. Johnson.
Worship, we just have two items of correspondence this evening. The first is a letter from Cynthia Hamlin, the president of the Parry Sound Seniors Club. It's a request for $5,000 grant. Again, this year, as was provided last year, and this letter request has been referred to the Director of Finance for consideration and brought forward to council. The second letter is from Brian Moore regarding water and sewer connection fees bylaw. Mr. Moore is concerned as he's become aware of these fees under the 2022 bylaw and is questioning the fees and asks that the town not continued with them until a proper development charges bylaw is in place. There may be some other response from a member of staff to this. I'm not sure.
Might be. Yeah. Thank you. We have no deputations and so we missed reports last time, so we'll do the reports from council. We'll start with Councilor McDonald.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be quick. February 10th, I visited Venture Based Studio at Canada College. The Student Innovative Business Lab will be a big asset to the community and will allow local business entrepreneurs and organizations a space to work for free on their ideas and plans. They will also be offering free seminars on how to start up a successful business and much more. I believe they just opened yesterday officially. So it's a great asset for the community. February 19th, I went to Kinsman Park with my son to enjoy the Snowfest festivities put on by the town. They had toboggan races, bonfire games, and interactive Georgian Bay Biosphere Reserve booth, live DJ, food, hot chocolate, and more.
The evening fireworks are amazing and well attended. Great job, April, Jamie, and staff for putting on a great day at Kinsman. And thanks to the Kinsman Club for providing the warming center and the hot drinks. Family Day Monday, we enjoyed free skating, barbecue at the BOCC. Thanks to Mayor McGarvey for sponsoring the barbecue and Councillor Borneman for dishing up the burgers and hot dogs. And that is the end of my report for today.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Borneman.
I checked after that event. There were no extra calls to the health unit.
No, right, there weren't.
So on February 8th, along with Councillor Keith, I attended the public meeting regarding the recreation master plan. Well, the meeting was sparsely attended, I'll say. It was pretty clear that there were certain concerns in the communities with regards to lack of regulation sized gymnasiums and I'll say coordination of facilities, times and events across the area, not just within the town, but again with the municipalities not coordinating more actively. On the 9th of February, I attended the Parry Sound Industrial Park Board meeting. We received a 2020 audited statement. That is correct. The 2020 audited statement due to maternity leaves, COVID, and issues with our auditors. We're playing catch up. At the same meeting, we also received the small drinking water and wastewater reports, which appear to be in order. February 15th, I attended the ice cap meeting. We were told that we're meeting objectives, making solid progress. The 2023 work plan was introduced along with the budget. Budget numbers actually down marginally, but our membership costs are up marginally. It pretty much a wash. And Moose Deer Point First Nation has now joined our group. Councillor McDonald's reported on the Winter Carnival. Great job by our staff, and Mother Nature helped out a little bit, providing nice weather, if not real winter weather. I've had a number of meetings at Belvedere. Last week on February 28th, along with other members of council, I attended a special meeting with respect to our capital budget. I'll leave it at that for now. I'm sure there'll be more reports in future in that respect. And earlier today, I attended another meeting at the airway. Work on the runway continues slowly through the winter months. Issues are arising with respect to the timing and duration of closures, which impacts on our business tenants and on our budget. Today, I think other members of council probably got the same thing from M&R. I know we have trouble disseminating information to the public, but M&R's put out a watershed advisory warning today, telling people that ice conditions are fluctuating, water levels are changing, pay attention and be careful out there over the next couple of weeks. And finally, I want to give another shout out to both Graham Ritchie and Megan Oldham, who continue to have great seasons within their sport internationally. I wish them nothing but the best of luck as they move forward in their events. Thank you.
Thank you. That is true. They're doing really well. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, staff, and public. Going back to Monday, February 13th, I attended the first Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting of the new council term. We welcomed new committee members and held the election of committee chair and vice chair. Pleased to have Dan Glennie re-elected as our chair and Alana Torres as vice chair. We reviewed the committee terms of reference. We had two deputations from, one from Charlene Johnston looking for ideas on the town dock band shell area re-imaging project. And the second deputation was from April Denman of the Downtown Business Association, talking about their 2023 beautification plan for James Street, as well as the waterfront. Thursday evening, February 23rd, I attended the West Parry Sound District Museum Board meeting by Zoom. Manager and finance reports were received. A discussion over the old barn on Tower Hill came up, which was once used for storage. The barn belongs to the museum, and the museum pays an annual honorarium for the ground that is consumed by the barn's footprint. We had some discussion about approaching the town and having it demolished, as there's no further need for it. And it would probably be the best and most cost-effective way of eliminating any kind of danger up there. The as everyone from time to time has problems, our manager has some computer problems. It looks like we have to replace one of the systems there. And again, we take a look at our policies each and every month, and we're looking at reviewing our rental policy, as we're hoping to get the kitchen back up in working order. And we also talked about marketing personal and business memberships for the museum. And last Tuesday, February 28th, I attended the special Town of Parry Sound Council meeting, in which we undertook the 2023 budget overview and the draft capital budget. And that's my report.
Thank you. We're going to go to Councillor Boleski, who's online.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February the 9th, I attended a closed session Zoom meeting of the Belvedere Board of Management. And as it was a closed session, that's all I can report on that. February the 17th, I attended a Zoom meeting with the Parry Sound Municipal Association. We held a discussion to select a name for position of president to be put forward and confirmed at the spring association meeting. We're presently looking for a volunteer to offer their services to fill the role of secretary treasurer. Both positions would be confirmed at the spring association meeting early May 2023. Also had a discussion of the speaker for the next spring meeting. February 22nd, I attended a Zoom meeting of the Belvedere Board of Management again, and it was business as usual, this one. On February the 23rd, on behalf of Mayor McGarvey, I attended the Stockey Center for the presentation of the Icelandic Prevention Model. This is an evidence-based organization that has successfully reduced substance abuse use and improved youth well-being over the past 20 years. It was a very well-attended and informative presentation. And on March 6th, I attended a Zoom meeting with the Parry Sound Chamber of Commerce. A very positive discussion was held on how the chamber could be more involved when cruise ships dock in Parry Sound. But unfortunately, I had to leave early, and that was all I could say for that. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashford.
Two great things happened that I was able to be at over the last couple of weeks. One being the Ukrainian dinner at the Bobby Orr on Saturday. It was a wonderful time. It was great to see our communities come together to support the Ukrainian people. And then also we have so many Ukrainian people living in our community right now. They did an amazing job. I may have had a couple too many pierogies, but it was great to see what they've brought to our community and how wonderful they have contributed over the last while. And the second thing, just to add into Councillor Vonerman's comments about the athletes. Now, my class, almost every boy's dyed their hair green, and they are representing our Shamrocks wonderfully. So congratulations to them.
Not getting ready for March 17th.
Yeah, no.
Just checking. Councillor Keith.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, fellow councilors, staff, and the public, some of my meetings that I attended will be brief in my explanation, as they've already been mentioned. The Waterfront Committee, I attended the Recreation Master Plan. The only thing also that I would add to that one was certainly we heard some real interest in the need for also basketball courts for outside and to be regulation size. I also attended for the Family Day weekend events each day. And I do have to say, I attended also the Downtown Business Association. They had the movie on, I believe it was Saturday. And I wanted to see what young people were watching and see if I could be entertained too. And I do have to say that I had also the experience of a little boy coming around to each table and asking me if everything was good. So that was good to see that he was starting off in public relations at the age of 8 years. I think we've got hope there. The other thing I would say also for the Family Day weekend, the fireworks at night were really great. There was a lot of positive comments about that. So it was really great that was happening. And I also attended the special council meeting as been mentioned. And the final thing on a sad note, though, I would express my condolences for the loss and passing of Kent Matheson, because certainly he's a name and a voice you've heard on the radio for 20 some years, and he certainly will be missed. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keith. Council staff and public, February 8th in the afternoon, I had the honor of attending Madeline Stanley's 110th birthday celebration. And it was truly a really good occasion, very small gathering, but the cheesecake, which is her favorite, was excellent. And that was 110. Yeah. So and her birthday wish is cheesecake and tea. So that's what they had, and it was really well done. February 8th at 7 p.m. I attended the pool committee meeting, and February 9th I attended the Parry Sound District Social Services Board meeting. The budget was presented at that meeting and passed. February 10th, I attended an Association of Municipalities of Ontario Audit Committee meeting. February 17th, there was a special Lakeland Power shareholders meeting. And then February 18th to the 20th was Snowfest. And I want to thank town staff and all the volunteers and event organizers for their efforts on the weekend. And I want to thank our town staff and volunteers for the support that they gave on Family Day at the BOCC. The free skate, crafts, games, face painting, balloons, making balloon figures, and everything was really well attended. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Borneman for helping to turn the hot dogs and flip the burgers, and my wife and son with their help on the barbecue. So lots of people, which was great, and it was good to see the numbers and smiling faces. That's so important. February 22nd, I attended a public health meeting, and I believe that members of council should have received the update from that meeting in their email. February 23rd, I had an AMO executive meeting in the morning, and then in the afternoon, Chief Thompson and I had a land ambulance meeting with West Parry Sound Health Center staff. And February 24th and 25th, I was in the 2-4 Bonspiel at the Parry Sound Curling Club, and $12,200 was raised to help support veterans families in our region and area, and over $2,000 was raised for our local paramedic services as well. So I'd like to thank Ray Pavlov, Tom Traversy, and all the volunteers and sponsors for that particular event, because it does do something meaningful for people in our particular area. There were also a couple of Ukrainian teams and in that event, and they did really well. And I know that Ray Pavlov has been working with them to encourage them to play the sport, which is great. February 28th, as mentioned, was capital budget for council. March 3rd, I attended a community living event at Canada College. The event was to thank the Ontario Trillium Foundation and the provincial government for their funding support community living's ongoing programming. And because of COVID and having to sort of revitalize themselves. They did put this out, which council members can have a look at. It was called Recover, Reconnect, and Rebuild. It's a summary of their project and kind of how the money was spent with regard to the money that they were given to refocus their organization after COVID. So I will turn that into Ms. Johnson, and anyone that wants to have a look at it is more than welcome to. There was our MPP Graydon Smith was on hand, which was good. So I was able to have a conversation with him as well. And to echo Councillor Keith's condolences to Kent Matheson's family. He will be missed, and as a celebrity in the area, we did lower the flags to half mast for in recognition. So that's my report. Okay. Item 911's been dealt with. We have an item from closed that's being brought forward. Item 7.1, the council amends resolution 2022-157 by removing Bob Farrell from the Committee of Adjustment due to his resignation and appoints Ray Kashigian to the Committee of Adjustment for the term ending November 14th, 2026, effective immediately. And I think we should send a letter of thank you to Mr. Farrell as well for his service. Questions, comments? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ashford and seconded by Councillor Keith. The council received the attached report in response to the drainage issues at 36 and 38 Isabella Street, as referenced the Averhoff deputation on December 20th, 2022 council meeting. Any Councillor McCann?
Thank you. I've taken an interest in this particular item and spoken to the property owner from time to time. I've read what staff has written and I've talked to the property owner and did my own little study on this. I'd like to propose an amendment to this that we would actually reimburse the property owner for the damage that was caused. If you'll indulge me here, I'll just kind of go over a short timeline as to why I feel this is important. When the public information session was held just before the project construction got underway, apparently there was no reference to the removal of any culverts, and the property owner had no reason to expect or believe that drainage would be affected. At some point during the construction, though, it was decided that this culvert in question was to be removed. The property owner was not alerted, and there's been some uncertainty as to whether the town was alerted about this action. The property owner suffered the inevitable result of flooding. Mr. Martin Aberhoff recollects that back in 1990, the town was aware of drainage issues at this location and would not have issued the original building permit without plans for culvert installation. In 2005, through a request for information through the Freedom of Information Act, there is some record of reference to Mr. Martin Aberhoff requesting a culvert extension. So there seems to be some acknowledgement that there was some drainage management in place there. The property owner believes that while the town may have known about the culvert installed as part of the water drainage management, it may not have been alerted to the removal. While a French drainage system has been created and the flooding has stopped, there's still the original water damage to which the property owner is claiming reimbursement. It's my feeling that the town should be the first to take responsibility for the action executed on behalf of the town, which caused the damage to private property, and reimburse Mr. Adrian Aberhoff with the monies that are being asked, which is just under 28,000. I don't believe we're setting precedent by doing this because there are particular merits and attributes to this story that are very, very unique. So I would offer that up as an amendment if I can get a seconder for it.
think that's more, this is the report. I think that's more of an outside resolution outside of the report.
Oh, okay, so I saw it that in the report itself that we were to accept the report that staff didn't feel that the owner should be reimbursed. And so that's why I put forth this,
Oh,
but I see what you're saying. I'm happy to go that way as well. I think it was more than just accepting the report, being asked to accept the report that states that the owner is not entitled to reimbursement.
Because all this is just receiving the report.
Well, in the extended part,
We're just
in
receiving
the background. Oh, well, can I offer that up as a direction then, rather than just a,
You could make another afterwards.
okay, all right,
Because we're just receiving the attached report. That's
okay,
all.
all right, I see, okay.
Any other comments on the report? No? All in favor, oh, Councillor Ashford.
Just, is it appropriate to ask questions about the report?
About
at
the
this time?
report? Absolutely.
Is, I just, after reading it, I was, still through you, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't clear if it was our fault or not. Exactly what the rules were for, I know, the tiles and stuff would be emptying into town property and those kind of things. So I wasn't really clear if this was something that kind of had something to do, like, is it proper that the drainage would go into a town ditch? Is that unusual? You know, and in that sense, is it kind of something just from looking at it, looking that we kind of did a remediation of some kind on our property, if I understood it right, is it something that that was our fault in some way, or are we just kind of being extra kind by doing a remediation, or am I misunderstanding it completely, I guess?
Mr. Kearns?
Excuse me, through your worship. So, so the remediation that was done was in an attempt to help Mr. Aberhoff determine, you know, what caused his issue, and to help alleviate any further issues. We did attend on more than one occasion, made a rather large excavation the first time, to no avail, because the pipe was not located where it was thought to by the owner initially. So we did indicate to the homeowner that, you know, we did make an attempt to try and help a ratepayer through the process, that we didn't have the resources to stay and search for things. So he did eventually uncover the end of the pipe. What I would offer is that it's very unclear to me when he's saying the removal of a culvert as to what he's referring to. I believe my understanding is that it would be a culvert that went underneath the driveway, further down slope. Not that there was a culvert attached to his drainage pipes removed at any point. That's not my understanding through this process. Now, I could stand to be corrected, but that's not my understanding in this. We did explain it. It's not unusual. I guess our topography, and you've heard lots of comments about geology and topography in town. The drainage is quite, it's not standard anywhere in town. This particular dwelling is located fairly high above the adjacent road allowance. So it's not something somebody would have anticipated. We have had other people ask to drain foundation drains, roof leaders, those sorts of things onto municipal road allowances, where we've granted permission to connect to structures and that sort of thing. The issue here appeared to be typically it's referred to as a big O. It's a 4-inch foundation drain that became buried at some point. I would also offer that we've had this discussion at different places throughout town with different homeowners. There are parts of your dwelling that require maintenance. Roofs, drainage, foundations, all of those things to ensure that those systems keep working. They don't last indefinitely. Sometimes often foundation drains become clogged with material that finds its way inside the pipe. So those are things that don't last forever. They do require maintenance, sometimes repair, sometimes replacement. So I can't comment on the vintage. Some of those dates we're hearing back to 1990, I think, or prior to perhaps. Sometimes those are within not unusual dates that you may require replacement or repair or maintenance in the interim.
Great. Any other questions on the report itself? No. Okay, all in favor of receiving the report? Anyone opposed? There was an abstention. It's carried. Councillor McCann.
Yeah, so I would just reiterate that I would move that in light of everything, and there is a lot of uncertainty, and in this day and age, well, regardless of what the amount is, it's under $20,000, and I think we have a citizen in good standing, and I believe that I mean, life's not fair, things happen, but in this case, and I'm not even blaming the town itself, it's just that something happened, and this action was executed on behalf of the town, which caused the homeowner some damage, and I would just like to move that we reimburse him for the monies that were asked.
We have a seconder. Councillor Ashford. Okay, we have a seconder. Any questions, comments with regard to Councillor McCann's recommendation? Councillor Keith.
Yes, I would just like to have clarification, Mr. Cairns. Could you just advise me what I just heard a minute ago, that the town caused the problem? Is that the case? Did I miss something in reading that report?
Through your worship, that's not what I'm suggesting, no.
Councillor Borno.
How many instances of backups, blockages, flooding from drain pipes and such do we have on an annual basis, Mr. Cairns? And I guess how many of these go through our insurance? How many of these go through private insurance? How is accountability determined on a case-to-case basis?
Through your worship, you're asking a question. I don't have the data, of course, for anything that goes through private insurance necessarily, because, and I would suggest, I'll offer as well, just from my own experiences with homeowners insurance. I refer to myself as insurance poor. I think I've purchased every optional insurance that I can purchase. So it depends on the coverages that you have. Often we have claims that come through the town because folks will say, well, I don't have coverage for that. And the standard answer when claims come through is that we, through our insurer, suggest that they file the claim with their own insurance company to start with. Should that insurance company see it as something that they wish to pursue with our insurance company, that's often the way that some of these claims, that's how we become aware of them, then if it's filed against our insurance company. But outside of that, I'm not sure that we have data, and it would certainly be often climate related, weather related, spring thaw, that sort of thing, whether there are or aren't, a particular number of backups and that sort of thing in any given year.
Councillor Barnum.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. Councillor McCann suggested that we aren't in any way setting any precedent or assuming any future liability by making payment as he suggests. Is that the case, or are we putting ourselves in the position that that, well, we did it in this instance, you should be writing a check over here and over here, down the road.
Through your worship, I mean, it's difficult to know. What I can say is, again, I'm going to refer to some of my past experiences in public works. And I know that some municipalities chose to go that route with, certain types of incidences claiming negligence on the municipality. And I think the lesson learned from those folks was that payouts beget payouts. It becomes very difficult to defend one over the other if you haven't been grossly negligent, which is typically the way that, when we're defending ourselves from lawsuits, for instance, that's often the wording you'll hear when we're doing court discoveries and cases and that sort of thing. Were we negligent in the actions of the municipality, whereby you may become responsible at that point? So that's often the way in which we view most of our operations. We do due diligence, and if we're not negligent, we would be hard pressed as staff to recommend to council that we take responsibility for an action.
We'll kick at this. So I think what I'm hearing here is that, the referral to the homeowner, my insurance company, is they take up the cause. If they see negligence on the town's behalf, they go to the town's insurance company, and it's resolved in that fashion. That, we're kind of a third party in this until that occurs.
Sorry, through your worship, I didn't realize I shut it off. Yes, I would say you're not incorrect in that. We become accountable to our own insurer at that point, and they ask us those questions to determine who's responsible.
I just want Councillor Boleski to take the chair just for a second, because I have a couple of questions, and then we'll go to Councillor Boleski. So you're in the chair at the moment, Councillor Boleski.
Well, thank you. Yes.
So my question is, there was road construction done in that particular area, correct?
Yes, through the chair, yes.
Yeah. Did we ever hear from the Aberhoffs at all about a flooding issue before the road construction?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge.
But we did after, definitely, the road construction, correct?
Not immediately after, but yes,
But
post
once we
construction.
got a
Correct.
significant rain, yeah. Okay. So possibly something happened during the road construction that changed the drainage that possibly caused the backup. I'm not saying necessarily the town did it, but it was part of construction that we had done. Councillor Boleski, I'll take the chair back, and you have a question.
Thank you, your worship. I think I've done pretty good there. Through you, your worship, just a bit of a statement, I guess. We're draining private water onto municipal roadway. The homeowner, he knew he was doing it. He knew the drain was there. I would have thought when the construction was going through, he would have seen that his pipe was being covered up and it wasn't being hooked up. It would look like to me, from what I can understand, it was just draining onto the land. It wasn't hooked into anything. The water, maybe downstream, there was a culvert put. I guess one of the issues I have, your worship, is sometimes from past experience, we're taking water off private property and putting it on a municipal property. And the problem we have in this town right now, we have a lot of infiltration from stormwater into our sewer system. So down the line, we're treating that water that's coming out of the basement of that house. So I think that has to be taken into consideration when we even allow them to be hooked up to drain water right into their ditches. But I think in this case, it should have been the homeowner that was held responsible for making sure that the pipe, if he had permission to have it out there, that the pipe was flowing free. As somebody had suggested earlier, home ownership involves not just doing something, walk away from it. So I think the homeowner has to take the responsibility here. That's it.
Council McCann.
So so a couple of points, when we're talking about insurance companies, I think, in this case, this homeowner and probably most homeowners are reluctant to go to their own insurance provider for fear that, their own rates will be affected later, even if the insurance provider comes back to the town and is successful in claiming its own damages. So I sympathize with the homeowner when they would tend to shy away from availing themselves to their own insurance coverage. The homeowner made the point of attending the information session before the construction started. There was no mention of this kind of I don't know, for lack of a better description, water drainage management issued, or there's no mention of removing said culvert. And so therefore the homeowner had no expectation of that being an issue. And I think it's very easy to, when construction is underway, to Mr. Aberhoff could have been at work the day that they opened up the ground and saw this and decided to pull it out and cover it up again. I think the bottom line here is that somebody made a decision to remove that culvert, and it caused a problem, and who takes responsibility for that if indeed that was never part of the original plan. And I think that if Mr. Aberhoff had known that they were going to remove the culvert, that he would have taken some action to mitigate all of this. So I respectfully disagree with what Mr. Bileski has put forth here in terms of putting the blame on the owner, on a homeowner at this point in this particular situation.
Council Barnwood.
Well, just to add another shade of gray to the color here, I suspect that there's probably a little bit of blame on both sides. There always is. I don't say that to be, derogatory to either the work that was done there or to the homeowner. And if this is, if it's the opinion of staff that we're heading to court with this, it might be in our best interest to negotiate some sort of settlement here. But as I said, I think there's some culpability on both sides in all likelihood.
Okay, anything further on this one? Councilor Barnum, are you putting forward an amendment to negotiate something, or? Well, we've got that, yeah. Okay, so everyone's finished talking about this one? Good, all in favor? Sorry, again? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, I'm in favor. I think. So that's carried. Ms. Phillips.
I just want to suggest through you, Mr. Mayor, that should be receipts should be provided to
Absolutely.
substantiate. Oh,
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Moved by Council Borneman, seconded by Councilor Ashford. The council authorized an exception to site plan control bylaw 2022-7257 to hold less securities than specified for the Harbor Trails development as a trial procedure, and that staff be directed to develop an alternative procedure for holding of and release of securities that may be more advantageous to encouraging development while still protecting municipal interests during the development process. Who wants to speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We have a bylaw in place to deal with site plan control securities. Staff are often presented with extensive discussion with developers with regards to the securities we hold. And it's quite a negotiation process, usually to go through these procedures to determine what is the appropriate amount of securities to be holding. Now, there's a number of different ways to look at the calculations for those procedures. We rely upon our engineers to help us with that. And of course, different parties have different opinions on what those securities should be. In trying to promote development, we feel there's an opportunity to maybe look at how we hold securities differently. And we would like to put forth a opportunity to try a different approach out than what the bylaw prescribes. And so that's what we're proposing tonight, is a different approach that could be called, what we're calling it, is a revolving securities. So we don't hold exactly what the bylaw says. However, we may hold a lesser amount for longer periods of time, and the developer won't be able to get it back at the same pace they would as if we were holding 100% securities. We recognize from a staff perspective that it's difficult for the developers they're paying for really the infrastructure twice. They have to pay us to hold on to the funds as well as to actually put the infrastructure into the ground. So that's a major commitment on their part. And especially at the beginning of a development, most developers have to deal with cash flow issues as they move through the process. We're putting forward a unique idea. It's not so unique that we came up with it ourselves. However, it's not normal or usual. There are some trials of a similar things going on in other areas. And we think with this particular development, who we have an excellent track record with, it might be a good opportunity to try something new and to see if it might be something that would help developers in the future, do their end of the projects in a more efficient manner.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Councillor Keith and then Councillor Ashford.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Thompson, what I'm wondering about is if this is passed tonight and this is like a trial process, will council know afterwards what the results are, shall we say, as to how successful this trial process is, so that whether or not down the road we'll be looking at a change in bylaw or et cetera?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is the intent of staff, and through the resolution, we're saying that that we would like to utilize the opportunity to try to develop something new. If we were to develop something new and it did work and we come up with something else or a different approach, it most definitely would have to come back to council for amendment to the bylaw to be a permanent fixture. So this is for now, a one-time issue, but we see merit in this. And we think that there is a good possibility to move forward with it to help out the development community and to still provide a level of protection to the municipality. So we're not taking more risks than we need to.
Yes.
Just for one follow-up, is that going to impact any change in the amount of staff time that it's going to take to do this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would not suggest so. It is a tedious process because the developers have to certify the infrastructure as it goes into the ground. They have to apply for money back. Those things would still be in place. The agreement, the site plan agreement, would outline how the funds are supposed to flow and when they're supposed to be returned. So that's typical to what we do now. It's just a little bit of a different procedure. That's all.
Okay. All right, good. Councillor Ashford.
I just want to mention that although I don't think it was anyone's intention today during the public meeting to claim that the staff at the town of Parry Sound are not development friendly, But I just wanted, when I read this, I thought this is a really good example of how much work our town puts into being development friendly and how much I appreciate it as a counselor that the staff are going to these lengths. And I think from the report, there was only a couple other municipalities said that even are doing this. So I really wanted to give my appreciation to the staff on that point.
It's good. Yeah. Anything further? No? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Counselor Keith and second by Counselor Ashford. That bylaw number 2023-7322 being a, oops. I don't think we went that one right away. 2-1-10-4-1, we got this one. Yep. Moved by Counselor Ashford and second by Counselor McDonald. That bylaw number 2023-7320 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a sponsorship agreement with Hall Construction Incorporated for the donation of a score clock for the Bobby Orr Community Center be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Counselor Ashford, second by Counselor Borneman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time passed, signed and sealed. Any discussion other than thank you very much? Yeah, I think we should definitely write Mr. Hall a letter thanking him and his corporation for this donation. I think that that's really wonderful. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Counselor Borneman, second by Counselor McCann, that bylaw number 2023-7321 being a bylaw to appoint and authorize the execution of an agreement with Harold Elston for Integrity Commissioner Services be considered as read a first time. All in favor? Carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Counselor Borneman, seconded by Counselor McCann. I think your signature's changed because you're using your left hand, so I've got, oh, oh, that is Counselor McDonald.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. That the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time passed, signed and sealed. Any discussion?
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's just, yeah, right. Anything further? No? All in favor? That's carried. Now I can go to this one. Moved by Counselor Keith and second by Counselor Ashford, that the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Counselor Keith and second by Counselor Ashford, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time passed, signed and sealed. All in favor? That's carried. Prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is a special operating budget meeting scheduled for Tuesday, March 14th. That's been changed, right? Yeah. So, so it's going to be the March 21st one then. So the special operating budget meeting is now scheduled for Tuesday, March 21st, 2023 at 7 p.m. Both meetings will be held at the Town of Parry Sound Council Chambers at 52 Seguin Street, entrance via Gibson Street, be live streamed and recorded. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. Council meeting schedule, notices of special council meetings, complete agendas and minutes and instructions on accessing live streamed and recorded council meetings are all posted on the town's website. Go to www.parrysound.ca and use the search bar. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting. And for Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Okay, now.